Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, welcome to coming to today's what's that called? Open house. It's a small gathering, but mashallah, more intimate, and inshallah, can have a more warm and close gathering, inshallah. So, welcome to Kufah Institute. I want to start with just sharing a few words about the importance of seeking knowledge. And the first is this idea that it's something that we just have to do. The Prophet ﷺ, he told us طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ, that seeking knowledge is necessary on every single individual. And what that really means is that not necessarily everyone has to become a scholar, but we should have enough knowledge in our life that we're able to live our life in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to live it. And we have enough knowledge in our life that allows us to follow the rules and commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a lot of times people don't really, there's different types of ignorance. Sometimes people have a blind spot and they know they have a blind spot, but sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And it's not until you actually engage in the study or formal study of knowledge that a person realizes, oh my God, I never even knew that. And sometimes it could be a big thing. Sometimes a person might be making the wudu their entire life the wrong way. A person, for example, might be praying their entire life the wrong way because they never really formally took a class. And it was just sort of religion was handed down to them from either their parents or Sunday school or some other informal means, but they never were able to formally or traditionally study that. The second thing I wanted to point out is just how important and how what's that called, lofty it is to become a scholar and study ilm. There's a Sahih riwayat in which the Prophet ﷺ said, "Fadlul alimi ala al-abidi ka fadli ala adnakum," that the superiority of the alim over the worshipper is like the superiority of me over the least of you. So what the Prophet ﷺ is really comparing the scholar to the regular person, not even the regular person. No, the comparison here is being made between an alim and the person who's actually doing ibadah. He's praying his five, they're making dhikr, they're fasting, they're doing good things. And yet the Prophet ﷺ said that the difference between them is like night and day. In fact, it's even more so. It's between the best of the ummah and the least of the ummah, meaning the Prophet ﷺ and the worst person in the ummah. And the reason that it's such an exaggerated difference, there's many different reasons. You could give an entire talk on why that's the case. But one of the reasons is that when a person is just engaged in worship, they might be worshiping, but they're not guarded from shaitan in ways where he can take them to places where they might not have ever thought they would go to. So, for example, there was this famous story about a person from Bani Israel, and he worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 500 years, right? For 500 years. And he was going to be entered into paradise. And he said, or he said that, yes, I would like to enter into paradise through my actions. And it was told to him, no, through the mercy of Allah. And he said, no, by my actions. And it was asked to him, why do you say by your actions? He said, I worshipped Allah for 500 years. I deserve to go to Jannah. And then it was told to him that if you want justice, there was a rock that you sat on for 500 years. Let's put the rock on you for 500 years, right? That's justice. And so a person can engage in worship, but sometimes they can really miss the mark when it comes to how to think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to behave with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Aqeedah can be wrong. Even the ibadah, like we mentioned, that person can be wrong. And the second aspect of this is that when a person is doing ibadah, they're like a foot soldier. When a person becomes an alim, they're like the general. And the special attention of everyone is always on the general, right? The standard of the army always needs to stay up. If it goes down, the army goes down. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts a very special attention on that individual who prepares himself to become the standard bearer of Islam. And then the last one is one I wanted to mention is when kharaja fi talab al-ilm kana fi sabilillahi hatta yarja. The person who goes out in the path of knowledge, they are in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's many people who see oppression in the world. There's many people who see people who are being oppressed and they want to do something about it. But obviously, they don't have the means to necessarily go out on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But one of the ways that we can say that, Ya Allah, perhaps we didn't have the courage to go out in your path in that way. But we can go out in a path that at least that we're capable of. And one way to do that is to go out by seeking knowledge. Why are they in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because when a person goes out to seek knowledge, in effect, they're carrying on the work of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they're continuing that legacy, which brings us to why we need scholars. That the Prophet ﷺ said, وَإِنَّ الْعُلَمَاء وَرَثَةُ الْأَنْبِيَاء. The ulama are the inheritors of the Prophet. So the Prophet ﷺ, his work was carried on by the scholars. Now, it took an entire body of scholarship to carry on each of the different functions of prophethood. And anytime a person engages in knowledge in some way, they're continuing that tradition. And Ibn Sirin, he said, Al-ilmu deen, that knowledge is deen. And when we preserve deen, we preserve knowledge, we in fact are going to preserve our deen and deen in this country. You know, almost every place I've gone to in the world where Islam is thriving, it was because there was a foundation of knowledge. And where you see Islam faltering, and we see Islam, escaping and withering, it's because there was a lack of attention given to the foundation, which is knowledge itself. There was a time, for example, in Brazil, when you went, Muslims had come to Brazil very a long, long, long time ago, and there was many Muslims there, but they didn't invest in institutions. And over the generations, I mean, sometimes we think that it can't happen to Muslims, but it does. So you see a lot of churches going out of business, and you say, well, that would never happen with the masjid. Well, it does. And so they didn't invest in the institutions when they were in Brazil, and after a couple of generations, you had children who will say, yes, my grandfather used to say something like that. When you tell them, La ilaha illallah, they'll say, yeah, yeah, my grandfather used to say something like that. But they didn't really have any connection left with that. And then, one of the people, I believe, from where we were, he left, he sacrificed his life, he went and stayed there. He founded, a madrasa for his Qur'ān. He learned the language. He, got married. He raised his children there. And, mashallah, this is about almost 17 years ago. But it was around that time that they had their first jalsa, that they were going to graduate their first batch of Kufahs. So you went with a community that didn't even know La ilaha illallah to people who are memorizers of the Quran. And that builds on each other. That builds on itself. The work works on itself, and the deen spreads and gets reinvigorated. So what are we trying to do here at Kufah? Number one, we want to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we want to do that by preserving, teaching, and living Islam in a proper form, in a proper manner. And we want to produce people who are the world changers, people who are intellectuals, who are academics, who are thinkers, but yet at the same time, they're morally grounded and they're spiritual. We are also bringing together, the best of East and West. A lot of us have lived in both worlds, Western in academia and in traditional Islamic learning circles. And you need to balance this, the sacred knowledge with the needs and the needs of and the service to the modern world. We can't apply medieval solutions to modern day problems because there's, incongruency there. And then the last thing is we'd say that, also offering people a mode and support to develop themselves professionally. So eventually, inshallah, when we have a accredited college, Muslim students will be able to study the sciences and the humanities in a faith-friendly manner. We'll offer mentorship, career development opportunities, because we want Muslims to grow and succeed in that way. And this is sort of encapsulated here in this coat of arms. You have the book Under the Pomegranate Tree. Here, a reference to Daarussalaam Deoband, which is one of the premier seminaries whose knowledge has spread all across the world. And many Darul Ulooms and Madaris spread from that one. It was one student and one teacher under a pomegranate tree. And from there, probably thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of individuals and scholars have been produced. And at the same time, we had on the right, you have the lighthouse. The idea here is that you want to be beacons in the darkness around. There's a lot of darkness in the world. There's a lot of confusion. There's atheism, there's agnosticism, there's all types of isms, and lots of times a lot of challenges for the youth and otherwise. And we want to be able to bring light into darkness. And Allah is the one who does it. يُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. But being able to engage in civic society, in mainstream society. And the tasbih here is a reference to the idea that knowledge is not enough. People need to be deeply pious and connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was the power of the Sahaba, not that they had memorized many hadith, but that they were men of Allah. And the anvil here is the last part is the professional aspect where, for long times, people would be on different sides of the aisle, that you're either in the deen or you're in the dunya. You go and study 10 years or you go and, become a doctor or engineer, and there's no in between. But we really believe that there's a time that you need to tear down that iron curtain, and sort of synthesize these both worlds so that people can live in the real world and at the same time stay connected to their faith. So in terms of our team, right now, and this is growing, mashallah, we have, this is sort of our core team. It's myself. We have Sheikh Kamaluddin, who is a mufti, who's done education work for almost 20 years, very prominent individual, finishing up his PhD at Oxford, has done stints at both Princeton and Yale. And then we also have Sheikh Dr. Ali Ismail, he was the vice chair of DEI at Ohio State. He's a board certified radiologist. And he recently finished his Alamiya studies. We have Sheikh Ahyan Yunus. He's our first full-time hire. He's studied at Daarussalaam, graduated, with very high marks over there, Hafiz of Qur'an, and then spent 2 years, or he spent time finishing his master's as a tuna, and he's coming to us from California this year, and he came highly recommended from the dean over there, mashallah. On the girls' side, we're also very fortunate that we have three, at least four, but the team is actually even larger than this. But four teachers this year. My own wife, Alama Zeba, Alama Amira, who was one of the most top engineers, scorers when she was studying. But mashallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired her and she took up the study of Deen. And mashallah, recently finished her Alama studies, Alama Lubna Zafar and Alama Umbreen Chowdhury, who was board certified anesthesiologist, with I think 3 or 4 kids, who actually took up the study of Deen and finished her Alama course also recently. And all of them reside here in Tampa. So what are we offering? We have different levels. So one of the nice things about the Kufah ecosystem is that there's a lot of modularity. You can make of it what you sort of want and what your life sort of allows. What we have seen, being in pedagogy for so many years, is like if you create a one size fits all package, there's many people that can't really fit into it. Everyone's life is different. Everyone's circumstances are different. And so we wanted to create something that offers people flexibility. So this is the basic offerings, and each one of these can be completed either full-time or part-time. But to make it easy, I would say that I'm just going to talk about, imagine if a person was studying full-time. So if a person was studying full-time, they can spend 1 year and do a diploma in Islamic Studies. And this would cover, and we'll talk about this in the next slide. But this is to give a person a comprehensive understanding of Deen, that they can live Islamically according to in their own life and bring their family up according to Islam. And if a person wants to study further, then there's a 3-year course, of which the first year is this DIS year. But this 3-year Alamiya one gives person enough knowledge that they can go out, work in the community, be an imam, give Jummah khutbahs, work with the youth, be engaged in activism, so on and so forth. And for people who truly want to pursue the academic study of Islam and dedicate their life to Deen, then we have the 7-year Alamiya 2 course, which rounds out the traditional Sharia studies course. We also, inshallah, will have postgraduate courses. We have advanced offerings. For example, this last year, we offered a class for ulama, in which they would study ilm al-ilal and grading the narrators and hadith, and some things that sometimes not normally taught in madaris. We also have standalone classes. We hope to be offering standalone classes and seminars and things like bioethics, Islamic finance, so on and so forth. This year we have one on Islamic intellectual movements, the history of Islamic intellectual movements, and how they rebuffed different advances from false ideologies of the time throughout Islamic history, and many retreats, halaqat, and rihlas, those type of activities. So it's a very large ecosystem. Part of it is the ilm aspect, part of it is the spiritual development, part of it is grassroots, getting out there, getting to the high schools, getting to the MSAs, working with YM and national organizations so that you have a infusion of scholarly guidance and scholarly input into mainstream society for our youth. And the idea really, not everyone will be able to devote 7 years, but how you take a little bit of that nur and transfer that to the masses, right? So that everyone can sort of know what that world looks like and partake of that benefit and that barakah. So this first year, we are starting with this diploma in Islamic Studies. And the class we have here two tracks. So the way that we designed this is that you can say a morning track and an evening track. And the evening track is going to be Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 to 8 o'clock, and then Saturdays from 8 to Zuhr, roughly speaking. And what will happen is that person will cover certain topics that year if they were taking track A. And then track B is Monday to Thursday, 8 o'clock to Zuhr. So there's two different tracks, and whatever classes are in one track will flip and be going to the evening the next year, and whatever is in the evening will flip and go into the morning the next year. So if a person is doing, for example, they're working during the days, they can't take full time off, so they can just take the evening course and just stick with it for 2 years, and they would finish what a full time student would have done if they had stayed for a year. And then I would also say that, for each one of these topics, there's a fair amount of flexibility about how intense they want to take the class. So a person can take the class and just audit. Say you're taking, I don't know, Ihya, right? Of the Ihya of Imam Ghazali. You can just take that and just audit it. No exams, no homework. You just, they're chilling. You just want to get some spiritual benefit. Right? That's completely fine. Person might want to actually work, but it's not diploma granting. Person wants to take it more seriously, wants to actually get the diploma, and then there will be homework and there'll be assignments. And then there will be other individuals who will, be dedicated. They're taking an entire year off of their life. Then they will be an honors track for each one of those classes. So there will be supplementary readings, a thesis, things that would expand their study beyond the basic scope of the class itself. And so this what we'll discover. The one, so these are just a brief overview of the different topics that we'll be doing over the year. First is schematic tafsir. And the idea of this class was really to offer people a mind map of the Quran. Person understands what are the contents of the Quran, sort of from 10,000 foot view. So if a person comes to you and asks you what's in Surah Ibrahim, you have a general idea of what's in Surah Ibrahim. If a person comes and asks you what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about in Surah Rahman, you have a general idea of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about in Surah Rahman. So doing that with the entire Quran, obviously that's not it's not an easy task, and that's why we've dedicated one entire year for that. So that's one level of tafsir. But at the same time, we will also offer another tafsir class in the evenings, and this is what, like the deep dive tafsir. It's only the 30th juz and select surahs of the Quran that we normally recite, like Yasin, Surah Al-Rahman. And over here is to go very deep into each surah. Each surah can be a 1 hour lecture. So, for example, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Qul huwallahu ahad, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say ahad instead of wahid, right? And then you think, okay, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Allahu samad, there's 15 different interpretations of samad. So how do you reconcile that into a cohesive understanding? When you look in Qul ya kafirun, in one place it says, لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون لا أعبد ما تعبدون, right? أعبد means I worship, it's a verb, and ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا, and the second time a person says ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم, I'm not a worshiper. أعبد in the first, عابد in the second. Why is it different? So we would go through those nuances of nothing happens by chance. What's that called? In the Quran, or in life in general. I think it was Albert Einstein who said that coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. Right? Everything happens with the will of Allah. Nothing happens by chance. So that's the second part. So you have sort of very high level tafsir and then deep dive tafsir, at least into the 30th juz. And when a person does that with the 30th juz, the idea would be hopefully would ignite a flame within them. They're like, I want to go to the whole Quran like this at least once. And that would be done in the 3 years. Then we have this Hadith class, and the Hadith studies, I feel, is life-changing. This is where we're going to Riyadh al-Salihin of Imam Nawawi, and there's different shuruhat and different commentaries on it. And it's not particularly fiqh heavy, but it's life heavy, right? It's the way that you, after going through this, you really get a lot of the irshad and the guidance the Prophet ﷺ, dispensed to us in terms how to live as an upright, righteous Muslim. And literally, it is like I would say it's life changing. A lot of people like to live, like to toot this. What's that called, byline that, oh brother, for me it's Quran and Sunnah, right? Quran and Sunnah for me, Quran and Sunnah for me. Well, this is it, right? Or this is what you're doing, Quran and Sunnah. But when it actually comes, when the rubber meets the road, and people say, okay, spend a year to read Quran. If you want to do Quran and Sunnah, then do it, right? Spend a year and read Riyadh al-Salihin on a share. Spend a year and learn the tafsir of the Quran. Then it becomes a little bit more daunting, right? And it becomes more than just a slogan. The other class that we have is an Aqeedah. And well, and the interesting thing, we're also, the first year particularly is a sort of a departure from how traditional Sharia has often been taught as text-based. So for example, if you did a book, like you're taking Aqeedah 101, most places you'll do Aqeedah Tahawiyah, right? So what we're doing is we're moving away from text and moving to an instructional model, like what you would have in college. There'll be a text that you can read in the class. So you can read Fiqh al-Akbar of Imam Abu Hanifa, you can read Aqeedah Tahawiyah, but the teacher themselves will bring the material, bring the content, and give exposure to students to certain levels of knowledge beyond what would just be in the book itself. The first semester will be basic Aqeedah, right? First, you have to know yourself, you have to know what we're about. And then the second semester will be a rebuttal to modern critiques, modern, what's it called, intellectual movements that, calling for atheism, arguments against Allah and Islam, whether it's slavery, the problem of evil, destiny, all the common ones. So that would be sort of covered in the second half of the year. And that's similar to what we're doing in Sirah. The first half of the year is more focused on the actual Sirah and learning who the Prophet ﷺ is. And once we do that, the second semester would be a rebuttal of critiques against the Prophet ﷺ. Very common. Why did he marry Aisha radiallahu anha? Why did he have multiple wives? Was he a desert robber and he just wanted money? So there's arguments against all of these. And on top of that, there's volumes which have been written about the miracles of prophethood. And the idea is that when a person gets done with this class, that they have rock solid yaqeen that the Prophet ﷺ could not have been anything except a Nabi of Allah. Right? And that's sort of the idea that you come out with the Aqeedah that our Iman in Allah is strong, and you come out of the Sirah class and your Iman in the Prophet ﷺ is strong. And then we infuse this class called A Journey Through the Ihya. Ihya is the magnum opus of Imam Ghazali, very large, work that we would not be able to go through in a year. But it would be selected readings through the Ihya to give an idea and infuse Islamic spirituality. That being said, I will say that Islamic spirituality is not ilm-qal, it's ilm-hal. It's not something that you study about in books, it's something that you experience. And that's something that we really want to push in this coming year, is for people who take the time out to come and study to start changing their life in meaningful ways. We want our students to start fasting Mondays, Thursdays, to bring Tahajjud Salah into their lives, to bring aware of zikr into their life on a daily basis. And for the students who are coming in for 1 year, we have them for 1 year, so it's a lot easier for us to do that. But a lot of people are going to be part-time as well. But hopefully that's going to be contagious and it's going to spread into a larger ecosystem of piety and righteousness. People making a list at the very beginning of the year of their own spiritual demons and working to weed those out. Because knowledge without action is bereft to some degree of benefit. Then we also have integrated Arabic. And this will be taught in a didactic fashion with yourself and know, but also with a focus on Arabic lab. And having taught Arabic for 20 years, oftentimes this is the place that a lot of students burn out when it comes to their Islamic studies. They're like, it's a class 5 language, it's too tough. And because they can't really get to the stuff that's really interesting, they're just struggling with fa'ala, fa'ala, fa'alu all the time. Eventually, it's not very interesting, and then they just burn out and drop it. But the idea here is that we're doing all the other stuff in English, so it doesn't get boring. But at the same time, you can't really enter into the world of Islamic scholarship without a very firm footing in the Arabic language. So there would be Arabic lab where, hopefully monthly students will give lectures, people will have to write essays, there'll be workshops, there'll be different exercises so that whatever you learn in a theoretical sense translate into a practical sense. And also tajweed. And finally, there'll also be a fiqh of worship. And the fiqh of worship class will be done with a focus on also modern issues. Your clothes get dirty, you send them to the dry cleaner. Can you pray in those clothes now? Right? If you have a kid, he vomits on the carpet at home. Now, what do you do? How do you clean it? So there's a lot of practical things that come up, and sometimes we don't know exactly how to deal with it. And some of these classes are also split. Uh, some classes are combined, meaning the sisters and the brothers are both in the same class with proper segregation. And some classes are actually just segregated, that the girls are only learning from the girls and the boys are only learning from the boys. And especially when it comes to fiqh of worship, there's some topics for like women on their monthly cycles. So it's much more comfortable for them to learn from a sister, number one. And number two, there's also this whole idea of suhbah with your teacher, sitting knee to knee, that spiritual connection and inspiration that we get from our teachers. And it's hard, you can't get that with a male teacher and a female student. So that's why you have at least 4 teachers on the girl side that they can connect with. They're with it, they get what's going on, they know the currents of modern society, and hopefully that will provide a point of connection. So what's that called? What's special about Kufa? I mean, I think the main thing, one of the main things is that there's many, mashallah, not many, there's a handful of organizations or places in the country where a person can go to formally study. And before it would have been like Chicago, maybe, Indiana with Hasnain, you had Zaytuna, you had Qalam, you had like a handful of Maqasid in Virginia, but really didn't have anything in the Southeast. And so that was one of the main reasons why we said, we have to have a major institute of learning here in the Southeast America. So we want to, create a curriculum with authenticity, formally trained, traditional scholars at the same time infused with academic rigor. There's a lot of flexibility and modularity, so you can take a class, the number of classes that suits your schedule, and we're balancing engagement with modernity. I think this is a very tricky area because sometimes people to try to look or feel relevant, they end up compromising Islam and Islamic values and becoming two-thirds spacey, and that's a problem. But at the same time, if you become very rigorous and ultra-Orthodox and conservative, that's also very alienating. And finding that balance, and that, alhamdulillah, many of the faculty have been playing that balancing act for a very long time in the West. And we want to create a warm, welcoming, inclusive environment for people who are coming in with a focus on people really changing their life and their spirituality and their character, and really want it to be a place for everyone, somewhere where you can plug in. Kufah is not a place you come in to just take a 1-year course. It's going to be a lifestyle, inshallah, for the community. You're going to plug in and at some level be involved with it for life, right? So the idea is that even if you graduate from 7 years, you'll have mentorship and people telling you, okay, your mentors telling you, okay, go into these manuscripts or teach this or do research on this economic, a fintech product to make it Sharia compliant. There'll be things for them to do. For people who've done 3 years, okay, we need you here, 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 and there's such a dearth of Islamic work, and there's a need over here. Can you go and work in the community here for our 1 years? You're going to go to your local colleges, transform your MSAs, and so this is how we spread the work of the Prophet ﷺ and the inheritance of the Prophet ﷺ. So what are some reasons commonly that people say that they can't study? Number one is that people say that like they're too busy. And And sometimes that may be the case. A person may genuinely be actually too busy to study, but as one of my sheikhs had said, he said 24 hours is a lot of time. And I know that sometimes there's a couple of things. Number one is when you make time for Allah, inshallah, Allah will make time for you. And He'll expand the time and put barakah in the time. And sometimes it will require a little bit of sacrifice. You'll have to sleep an hour less. Sometimes you'll have to drive an hour more. But understand that ease is the poison of life, and struggle is the pleasure of life. Right? A life which a person has no challenge is an impotent life that is full of no adventure, has no fury to it. Right? It's impotent in that sense. And then I would say that very practically speaking, I think when people say they're too busy, it's really a choice that we make. If a person decides, we just look at our phones and check our screen time app. I mean, challenge someone to say that the app shows less than 3 hours a day, right? That's 3 hours a day that if a person can choose, they want to spend that on Netflix or at the masjid. They want to choose that on Instagram or at the masjid. And nature, of course, of vacuum. I'll tell you a lot of the reasons that people go to social media or scrolling on the internet. It's not necessarily because they're into that stuff. It's because they're just bored. They have nothing to do. They're just sitting and like, oh, what else am I going to do? And so they just open the phone and try to keep themselves stimulated. Well, now you have something bigger than life. You have your classes, you have stuff going on. Then the first place you're going to go to is not, Instagram. Hopefully, it'll be the Kufah app and see, okay, what's going on? What do I need to do? Inshallah, we will have an app as well. People say I can't afford it. Inshallah, we're trying to take that away by like no one left behind. No one will be turned away due to lack of funds. Sometimes people are afraid that, if my kids or I study this, I'll become too religious. And, it's not infrequently that we hear that. And I'm just thinking like, what does that even mean? You want to be I want to follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a little bit and also disobey him a little bit. It doesn't really, when you say it like that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And, when I was young, I would hear this all the time from the uncles and aunties, like, Berte, you shouldn't become too extreme. You should have some deen, you should also have some dunya. And what they basically meant is like you should obey Allah a little bit, but also disobey Him a little bit, right? It's like saying, have a little bit of Jannah, but have a little bit of Jahannam too. Both of them are okay, right? So when you say it like that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And it's udkhulu fi silmi kafa. And you can't really treat Islam like a dimmer switch that, okay, I just want my kids to have 10% Islam. If a person is fortunate enough that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the heart of their children or their own selves, that they actually want to become truly religious, then that is the ultimate success in this life and the hereafter. There's nothing that could be greater than that. I think people have just a misconception of what it means to be religious, right? And I think that's one of the other things we want to sort of break down. People feel like if you're religious, you don't have fun anymore, your life comes to an end, and that it's just boring and you're just angry and frowning at people all the time. And it's nothing. I mean, it's actually a beautiful life where there's actually peace in your life. You're at peace with yourself, you're at peace with your Lord, you're at peace with your family, you're looking to spread peace in the world. And your life, even if you're sleeping on a bed of thorns, it becomes a bed of roses. And the last thing, I think is that people sometimes are very worried that if I do this, I will fall behind in my career. I'll fall behind in my studies. I won't do as well. I mean, I would make the counter argument. Why don't we worry that if I don't do this, I'll fall behind in my akhirah? Right? I mean, that's how we should sort of be thinking about these things. But even if you were to make that argument that you'll fall behind, I don't know if there's a really clear concordance between the fact that if you save 1 hour by not studying at Kufah or somewhere else, that 1 hour will translate into something useful that you're gonna write another pro forma for work or write a better thesis, and most likely it's just gonna melt away into oblivion. So anyway, registration, alhamdulillah, is open right now. Classes are slated to begin August 4th. Classes, inshallah, will be held here in the soccer field behind. It won't actually be in the soccer field, inshallah. We're starting hopefully construction on next week. So we'll have our own dedicated space over there and then hopefully build up the space as things go on. There's financial aid available and scholarships available for deserving students. So if you're interested in that, let us know about that. And then I would just open up the floor to you guys now. What's that called? If you have any questions, would like to learn more or anything on your mind. Jazakallah. And we're going to be around afterwards. So if you feel like you'd like to ask personally, you can ask personally. And then there's sisters on the sister side, inshallah, that you can ask on that side as well. Yeah. Walaikum salam. Right. So attendance is being tracked. And if a person, the way that we're sort of doing this is to see how much students are on track with the class. So if a person's falling too far behind, then we might suggest to them that, you might move from being a regular student to an audit student because you're 4 weeks behind everyone else. It's hard to catch up. And then you can redo it next semester if a person wanted to do it the other way. But the advantage is, we have a pretty good AV setup. So we have like professional cameras, that type of stuff. So there will be audio visual recordings of all the classes. So for people who have a genuine need, we have, for example, one student, inshallah, coming from South Florida, is a surgeon. And he said, I want to come and study. And I said, oh, okay, we'll make something work for you. This one. He said, no, no, I don't want to study from here. I want to come there and study. I'm taking a year off. I said, wow, that's amazing. But he's like, I need to come back and at least work 1 or 2 days. Can I get recordings for those days? So we worked it out for him that for the 1 or 2 days that he'll need, that he'll get the recordings, he can just go through those. So if a person, for like you mentioned, he's working at night, they're just not able to make class, then as long as they can take the recording and then keep pace with the rest of the class, and that would be based on your quizzes and the homework, and you're just hitting the mark and not falling behind, then it shouldn't be an issue. And I would also, really recommend if you can, if students can really help spread the word to their friends, or their family members. If you know, for example, you have an aunt and she's free during the days, you have a cousin, she's free during the days, tell her to come and take a class in Riyadh Salihin or something like that. I think once uh, there's a, as people come in and people experience it, it builds this energy and this momentum. And inshallah, hopefully that will, help us move to the next phase. I mean, the idea with the institution eventually is like a 100, 200 year goal beyond, way beyond where after we're gone, inshallah, with, hundreds of students, a residential campus, athletics, it's a really, I think, far reaching project. And alhamdulillah, you guys are here at ground zero, building it. And in some ways, the students are just as important as the teachers. Like we spent months, like literally skimming the scholar scene, trying to find the right teachers. I mean, I can't tell you how many calls, how much existential crises we had. Are we going to be able to do this year? We're going to get full-time faculty. Alhamdulillah, we found that, and then now we moved to so we needed a place, we needed teachers. Alhamdulillah, Allah send that, and the next thing now is like we need students. And I mean, it, a good sort of example of this is that um, uh, some of you may know, I've been very sick for very, very long. And there's times where very debilitated. But through that, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave tawfiq to keep on teaching tafsir. That's one of the classes I would be teaching. We did Ibn Kathir, and we do it every week, once in the morning. We did, I think, 10 juz from there. Then we went to Jalalain, and then we did, different selections, Ibn Juzay and other Safat al-Tafasir and other tafasir. And that whole journey, I don't know, 6, 7 years ended, not ended, but came to one milestone yesterday when we finished Surah Nas, right? And it was a very humbling moment for me because it's like, so it's like for me, I was just, Allah, you're so amazing that you even let me, fake it and be in that position. But during that process, I can tell you, like, I mean, this year's tafsir, alhamdulillah, was very different. But in the middle, there's many times you barely like scraped out of bed and just sat in front of like Jalalain. I couldn't even read my own handwriting. I just was translating. I would get through it. I just feel, and there was these students who sat there for 5 years and endured my excuse of a class. That's what I would call it in some ways. But I'm indebted because if they weren't there, yesterday wouldn't have happened. Right? So I think in the same way, everyone who sort of goes into building institutions in the beginning, despite all the growing pains, inshallah, has a very special place, inshallah, in building this work. Any other questions? Walaikum salam. That's a good question. So do we have any prerequisites was the question. We are saying that we want people to be at least able to read Quran, right? And ideally, if you could also write Arabic, it would be beneficial. But if a person can't, you can technically translate it. But um, ability to read Quran would be beneficial. For those people for whom that is a hurdle, we might have some other options. Like for example, we've had some converts, we had some people who didn't have that, so we're going to maybe have a pre-course to the 1 year. So inshallah, that will be ready. It won't be starting August 1st, but inshallah, they will also be this next year. But for by and large, you can come as you are. You don't have to have done Sirah or really studied Islam ever before. And I would also say that, and there were also another course I didn't mention that we have, which is a very unique course in the first year. I'd be remiss not to mention this Islamic Humanity course. And this is being taught by Malak Al-Din, the person who I mentioned who's from Oxford. He's like, one of the premier traditional academics in the world, perhaps. And it's a very interesting course. That when I was in undergrad, I had a professor that said that, if you're trying to tackle an argument, don't go for the branches, you should go for the root. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes when we defend Islam and defend the Quran or defend these things, you're working knowing a Western framework of how to think, what's right, so if we start off from the universal, I'll give you one example, that there's freedom of speech is a universal. Okay. Then basically a person can say, I don't believe in God. They can say whatever they want. And what we say that we have blasphemy laws, where it doesn't make sense in that era, in that paradigm. But we would start by saying, no, we don't believe that freedom of speech is a universal. How could you say that? Well, I mean, you also say the same thing. You say hate speech is not okay. Right? A person can't, you can't go in a theater and shut fire. You can't, if you're in a country, you can't engage in insidious libel, right? That would be tried for treason. There's every system has certain limits to freedom of speech. So now once you start changing the framework and so we would do this for each of the sciences, Qur'an, Hadith, how have traditional frameworks of learning and networks of learning worked in those areas? And what's the use of getting hyper academic like that? Because once a person understands that, it's very hard for shaitan or Western academics or Western polemics to break down a person's faith because you get it and you understand the pitfalls of other ways of knowing and epistemological what's it called approaches. So that class is also there inshallah next year.
What if taking a mixture of classes, age, not the same order? Uh, it will feel
Mhm.
be right. So you took like there, then like the schedules, whatever was in the morning, then switch over to the evenings.
Yeah, so part of it is going to be dependent on staffing, but that vacillation morning and night will continue every year. And so they'll always be going on like that. And the idea would be you just have to wait until the class you need comes around in the rotation. So I would not be able to guarantee, energetically, it'd be very difficult for the institute to offer every class every single semester because then you have to overstaff. But then eventually that class will come around, hopefully to a time where a person could take that.
So then, okay, I mean,
Or the other way that a person could do it is if they, for example, they did almost everything, they have one class remaining, it doesn't fit out, and just go through the recordings, and then there'll be office hours and take the exams. If they're able to pass the exams, that might be another way, but that would be a very specific circumstance for it.
then, the classes. Yeah. Right. Usually, like, okay, the traditional college setting, you have 101
Mhm.
and 200s, right? Is that going to be the same? Some of the
Yeah, so some of, but that will be more for the more advanced courses. So some of the classes in years 2 or 3, person won't be able to get into them if they haven't had, doesn't necessarily have to be here, but if they've done not had the something which is similar to the prerequisite or has equivalency to the prerequisite, it'd be hard for them to transfer. I will say that inshallah, we're also hoping, we also realize that there's a lot of students who've already spent time studying and doing kitabs elsewhere. So a lot of people have gone to Masjid, Daarussalaam, Qalam, and they come back here and they're going to USF, they're doing this, they're doing that. And there's no pathway for them to continue. And so at least for now, because we only have one full-time staff, we're hopefully to at least offer one advanced study course for those students. So we're going to see what books that they've done and then try to offer them one class that none of them have done. So that it'll be novel for them and they'll continue in in their learning. Like, hopefully, like next year, we hope to bring on 2 more staff. So then we'll have be staffed enough for those subsequent years. اوكي خير سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم نشهد ان لا اله الا الله نستغفرك ونتوب اليك يا أخي المهندس.